Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Now, there is a lot of breaking news in general to get to, or we could do what others offer, which is talk about Leap Day all morning. It's your call. I'm going to make my best judgment call and suggest that maybe there's other things to talk about. Perhaps Putin warning the West of the risk of nuclear war. This coming from Reuters. President Vladimir Putin warned Western countries, Thursday, today, it is breaking news, that there was a genuine risk of nuclear war if they sent their own troops to fight in Ukraine. And he said Moscow had the weapons to strike targets in the West. This is addressing Parliament, where Putin talked with members of the Parliament and other elites in the country. He repeated his accusation that the West is bent on weakening Russia, and he suggested Western leaders did not understand how dangerous their meddling could be in what he cast as Russia's own internal affairs. He prefaced his warning with a specific reference to an idea which was floated by French President Macron of Europe NATO members sending ground troops to Ukraine, a suggestion that was quickly rejected by the U.S., Germany, Britain, and others. Quote, according to Reuters, Putin said, Western nations must realize that we also have weapons that can hit targets on their territory. All this really threatens a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons and the destruction of civilization. Don't they get it? That's our first breaking story. Now, yesterday also, and we're going to be moving quick this morning. There is a lot to cover, and I hope that you weigh in on all of the issues of the day. We averted a government shutdown yesterday. There's that. We probably won't dive too much into that. But Mitch McConnell, what do you think? Mitch McConnell stepping down from GOP leadership. He is going to call it quits in November. I wonder how much of that has to do with his thoughts on Trump. We know that McConnell and Trump are not best friends. We'll put it that way. He will continue to serve in the U.S. Senate, but will allow, and I quote, the next generation of leadership to take the helm of the Senate Republican Conference. Now, McConnell turned 82 just last week, and he said, the end of my contributions are closer than I prefer. I don't know if does this come as a surprise? I don't think it comes necessarily as a surprise. Some of the names being thrown around to replace him are kind of interesting. And obviously it's very early in that race for a GOP leadership position in the Senate. Now, Chuck Schumer, our senator, and the Senate Majority Leader said this: during my years in the Senate, Mitch McConnell and I rarely saw eye to eye when it came to our politics and our policy preferences. But I am very proud that we both came together in the last few years to lead the Senate forward at critical moments when our country needed us. Like passing the CARES Act in the early days of the COVID pandemic. How about this one? Because you can't let any opportunity go by. Finishing our work to certify the election on January 6th. And more recently, working together to fund the fight for Ukraine. I know it's been a difficult year for him and his family, and I wish them the very best. Now, who are they saying? Oh, well, we're getting waves coming in. Some of the names being thrown around. Politico, I think I have this up on the screen. The Insider's Guide to the Secession Race. They handle it somewhat weirdly in this piece from Politico, saying, somewhat confusingly, all three are white men named John. Minority Whip John Thune, former Whip John Cornyn, and GOP Conference Chair John Barrasso. So they're now calling them, and I think Politico stumbled on something they think is very funny. They're calling them the Three Johns. Senator Josh Hawley, a McConnell critic, said there's a lot of people who want it, clearly, and the race has been underway for months, so now it's going to get really intense, I suspect. He also said he had no preference, and he's open to persuasion. So who would you like the three? And that's just the three that are being thrown around. There's other names that will, as they put in this piece, be wild cards that won't be named John, I suppose, if that's going to be. They must have mentioned this Three John thing 20 times in this article. But the wild cards, Rick Scott was asked if he's thinking about it. He's a pro-Trump Floridian. He did not rule out running. Now is the time to honor the current leader's legacy, and I'll make my case at a later moment, Rick Scott said, adding that for now he's focused on his fall re-election efforts. There could also be additional GOP leader hopefuls who emerge over the next few months. Senator Tommy Tuberville told Politico on Wednesday that he'd expect as many as 8 to 10 candidates to enter the race. One name to keep an eye on, NRSC Chair Steve Daines, an early Trump backer who, if he impresses with his performance on behalf of the party's Senate candidates this fall, could get talked about as a potential future leader. So there is our quick overview. We already have a comment here. And a quote from a viewer. Chuck Schumer is delusional. Thank you very much. Keep those comments coming in. Keep those waves coming in. We got a lot of action starting off the program this morning, but we do have to take our first break. We aren't just going to focus on McConnell. I know you are aware of the news. We're trying to give you a little bit of background on where we see the future headed with that. What are your thoughts about his legacy, for lack of a better term? I know the media focuses laser-like on some health issues, which is very interesting as we are at a time when Joe Biden, the president of the United States, had a physical yesterday, and the media giving it glowing reviews that he's doing great. His gait is a little bit stiffer than last year. Otherwise, everything's hunky-dory until you read into about the 10th paragraph and you learn that a cognitive test was not required. So we may talk about that. We've got a few things here. But we also have, and yesterday I unfortunately had to kind of glance over because we got so busy. Well, I do hope to focus a little bit on the redistricting efforts. Governor Hochul signed on to the new proposed map. So we'll try to get to, not proposed or voted, but there could be a lawsuit, but it looks like there's not going to be a lawsuit. We'll talk about it as much as we can. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. We're just getting started right here on Big Fox. It's a little bit snowy out there on Market Street this morning as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. This is Frankly Speaking. One quick reminder, because I don't want to forget, we had an interview a couple weeks back with our good friend Jim Griffin, and he told us about the first Pint Wood Derby Championship. Now, this goes to benefit Five Rivers Council. You may recall the interview, but tomorrow is the last day to register. You build your own Pinewood Derby car. And now I want to remind you, if you missed the interview, this is for adults 21 plus. It's going to be held Saturday, March 9th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Carrie's Brew House over on Bridge Street in Corning. Registration fee is $50 per car entry, and the deadline is tomorrow. It includes a Pinewood kit, finger food at the event, and a cash bar for drinks. So to find out more, or you can also sponsor the event as well, but to find out more, in general, call Jim Griffin at 607-769-8351. That's 607-769-8351. Okay. The Illinois judge, in trying to make a name for themselves, has disqualified Trump from the GOP primary ballot because of what they deem the ex-president's role in January 6th. Now, we know this is going to the Supreme Court, so this is where we have an opportunity for a lot of various judges to make a name for themselves. Now, I do, again, find the argument very hard to make that you are fighting against a threat to democracy, that threat being former President Trump, that you're fighting against this threat to democracy, all while taking the lead nominee in the Republican Party for president, taking his name off of a primary ballot. A Democrat taking a Republican off the Republican primary ballot. It's just a hard sell for me. They've been doing it without any type of sheepishness. An Illinois judge on Wednesday barred former President Donald Trump from appearing on the state's Republican primary ballot over his role on January 6th. Illinois is the third state to remove Trump from primary ballots, citing the 14th Amendment, the so-called insurrection clause. You've heard plenty about this, and Illinois now joins Maine and Colorado. I know there was talks of it happening in New York, and there was some, I believe it was an Assemblyman, who again wanted to make a kind of a name for themselves and suggest that we fast track it in New York to take Trump off the ballot. Again, it's PR for this judge, Cook County Circuit Judge Tracy Porter, who is a Democrat. She paused her order until March 1st in order to give the former president time to appeal. Porter's decision overruled the bipartisan Illinois State Board of Elections, which dismissed a challenge to Trump's candidacy last month after determining that it didn't have the authority to rule. So again, the bipartisan State Board of Elections says, no, we're not gonna do this. And Democrat Cook County Circuit Judge Tracy Porter said, oh, yes, we are. The courts, and you know what? You know that I've been talking about this a lot on the program about how chaos is a term used a lot to describe Trump. And the media says it, Democrats say it a lot. Nikki Haley says it a lot. And I'm sure you've noticed this, whenever something like this comes up, the judge always says, and it's not just with the ballots, but just in setting up the date, which would happen to fall during the primary, whatever the case may be, they'll always say, quote, that they did not reach the conclusion lightly. And that's what Porter wrote in her 72-page ruling. The court shares the Colorado Supreme Court sentiment that did not reach its conclusion lightly. The court also realizes the magnitude of this decision and its impact on the upcoming primary Illinois elections. The court's final determination on this issue is that Trump fails to meet the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment's disqualification provision based on engaging in insurrection on January 6th, 2021, and his name should be removed from the ballot. Now, Congressman Nick Langworthy weighed in on this. He had this to say: the court's decision to remove President Trump from the ballot in Illinois is another blatant example of activist judges interfering in our presidential election and stealing the choice from the American people. They will do anything to stop President Trump from going back to Washington to reverse their radical and woke policies. The American people see right through this abuse of power. And of course, we've had this conversation. Many people in the media have had this conversation. Does this do more damage for their cause than good? When I say their cause, which is to stop Trump from becoming president, to really kind of muddy the water come election day, because many people who, and we've said it a million times, and I quote the former Congressman Joe Sempolinski on it all the time, because there may be people that dislike Trump, but really dislike this weaponization of the justice system, dislike what Trump calls the swamp or the deep state. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that, but we got to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. Weather's a little bit different than it has been the last couple days. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. All right, let's go through some viewer comments. We're just kicking off the show, and boy, we were receiving a lot of comments. Illinois judge is a tyrannical minion, writes one voter. Well, voter, hopefully, and one viewer. Another is, what is the big deal about a government shutdown, quote-unquote, threat every other month? Good point. Do they really think we are shaking in our boots over these baseless threats? The U.S. is such a joke with the middle school acts of our supposed elected leaders, and Russia and China are watching and chuckling at the same time. And I will not repeat the end of this, but I would say to the viewer that I would agree with your sentiment at the end, that we'll just say it's getting kind of old. Yeah, I think normally it's a really great piece for the media, because they can blame the government shutdown on Republicans. This time there just happened to be so much news that it kind of got glanced over. But I'll continue. Next viewer. Does anyone draw a parallel to it's the only states that Trump appears to have a chance at winning? Even states that Republicans wouldn't normally have a chance at winning, meaning taking off the ballot. And then we have the Democrats have spent so much time on virtue signaling and bad decisions, they are alienating their base. There is an interesting part to that about how the base looks today in the Democrat Party. Because if you look at it, obviously, I didn't think the non-committed vote in Minnesota, or uncommitted, I should say, vote was all that impressive. But if you look at the numbers and what was predicted, according to the Daily Beast, now the Daily Beast is a kind of a far left outlet, they're saying the uncommitted campaign shattered expectations against Biden. The uncommitted campaign said it hoped to get 10,000 votes in the Michigan primary. The movement ultimately got more than 100,000 uncommitted votes. Now, can just take a lesson from this. And I would say this to both parties. Undersell and over-deliver. Instead of coming out, well, let's just, to be critical for a moment, let's say, because we play all sides here, we talk about all sides. When Trump is out there saying, or whoever one of his surrogates or supporters are saying, Trump's going to win South Carolina by 40 points. And then he comes in at, 20-some points, 25 points, almost 30 points. And then the media can run with, well, Nikki Haley beat expectations. Trump didn't perform, he was underwhelming, those type of things. In this case, the uncommitted campaign against Joe Biden says, hey, we're going to get 10,000 votes. We're hoping for 10,000, and they get 100,000, and now, according to the Daily Beast, it shattered expectations. President Joe Biden easily won Michigan's Democrat presidential primary. We know that. That part was never in question. What was in question, however, was how many voters would register their discontent with the uncommitted vote. When the final results came in, it was clear the efforts to send Biden a message worked. In fact, when all the votes are tallied, the campaign in Michigan to get Democrats to vote uncommitted might even send former President Trump a message. So the uncommitted campaign said it hoped for 10,000 votes, like I said. That threshold was so easily cleared Tuesday that uncommitted looked like it would get 10,000 votes in the Republican primary alone, garnering more than 33,000 votes among GOP primary goers. There you go. Anyway, enough on that. How about this? I mentioned it quickly. Joe Biden exercises at least 5 days a week and is, quote, fit for duty, is what his doctor said on Wednesday in a memo. It's interesting. Traditionally, doctors are subjected to press conferences. That's been the tradition. Has not been the case under the Biden administration. But the president sparked some concerns yesterday when the news broke that he was, as he was headed to the helicopter, the plane said, going, or maybe to his limo, I don't know, I just saw the walk by. He said, going to get my physical, kind of thing. Everybody said, wait a minute, this was not on the schedule. What's going on? Well, this was his annual physical that showed an 81-year-old had a root canal last year and is being treated for sleep apnea, but is in good health. O'Connor wrote in a memo, the president feels well, and this year's physical identified no new concerns. He continues to be fit for duty and fully executes all of his responsibilities without any expectations or accommodations, or any oops, Freudian slip, without any exemptions or accommodations. Now, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters the president had not taken a cognitive test and did not need one. We did not hear from the doctor on that. We heard from a spokesperson. All right, we've got to take another short break. Stay with us. Do you want to talk about the Supreme Court deciding the Trump immunity claim? The media is now very, very much mad at the Supreme Court again, saying further delaying election subversion trial. I do like how when a decision is made about a trial for Trump that fits right in the middle of like a Super Tuesday or something within the thick of the primaries, all of a sudden it's great. There's no reason to be critical. This judge is just doing their duty. When they feel the Supreme Court has delayed on some things and it pushes back stuff further, well, then it's the end of the world. It's been the court has been lurched to the right. Interesting how coverage changes on a case-by-case basis. All right, time for our next break. Stay with us. We're having a lot of fun this morning, and frankly speaking. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking. A few more viewer comments to read from over the break. Actually, Tlaib had said they wanted 10% of the vote, meaning that uncommitted vote in Michigan, not 10,000. Media can't even get that right. Well, that's why I thought the piece was interesting, because it was from the Daily Beast, far left outlet. They're trying to make maybe a little bit more political hay out of it, trying to send the message to Biden, see, you better turn on Israel. You better listen to that faction of the Democrat Party. Another comment from a viewer. Democrats are auditioning for larger roles in this toxic political environment, and they know the stepping stone and threat is Donald Trump. This is a good point. The Illinois judge might want a U.S. Supreme Court appointment. Letitia and Fannie, they're looking at a run for governor, and I would agree with that. I think, and that's why when we saw it with that Assemblyman pushing for Trump to be taken off the ballot here in New York, it is either a political stepping stone or a way to get media attention. It's kind of politics. I wouldn't say that it's worse, because there's always some new bar on that. But the Supreme Court is going to decide the Trump immunity claim, further delaying election subversion trial. The court expedited the case and will hear arguments the week of April 22nd. The move puts the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination on track for another high-stakes date with the High Court, which earlier this month heard arguments in a separate case questioning whether Trump disqualified himself from running for a second term under the 14th Amendment's insurrection ban. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court arguments could come while Trump is on trial in New York on criminal charges of falsifying business records as part of a cover-up to conceal hush money payments before the 2016 election. Trump has pleaded not guilty. The High Court on Wednesday ordered that a lower court ruling against Trump remain on hold until it decides the issue. As is common when granting a case, the court released only a short order and did not indicate how the justices voted. But now you see the long knives out for the Supreme Court yet again. Trump uses the slow legal system to his advantage. The Supreme Court is helping. Isn't it amazing that now the media is concerned that, and I'm going to say allegedly, but they're saying that someone uses the legal system to their advantage? Because if you look at historically, who has benefited the most from using the legal system to their advantage? Really bypassing the will so often of the voters and going when they had more potential for a win, going to the Supreme Court. We've seen that time and time again. But it's interesting, again, memories are short, and they hope that you forget and don't notice the hypocrisy in their anger. MSNBC anchor Rachel Maddow, she called the court the craven Supreme Court is evident in what they're doing with the pacing here. You know, putting this off for 7 weeks and sitting on it for 2 weeks for no reason, obviously pushing all of these cases that they can push to a point where Trump will be standing for election before any of us heard the verdict in any of those cases. Got it? It is the timing. Is the idea that the immunity thing is an open question? Is presidential immunity an open question? Okay. Now there is anger at the courts. Hey, we're going to just jump through a lot of things. If you guys don't mind, we can focus on each of these more in depth, but there's so much to cover. I do want to get to some New York issues as well. We also have just some general kind of hit and misses. Oh, yeah, I mean, here's another gigantic story that we didn't even mention yet, where Hunter Biden testified before Congress. According to Miranda Devine, Democrats have been focused on the indictment of Alexander Smirnov, the trusted FBI paid informant of 13 years standing, who they have branded a Russian spy before he even goes to trial. Hunter Biden used Smirnov as a crutch in his opening statement to the impeachment committee yesterday, claiming Smirnov has made you dupes in carrying out a Russian disinformation campaign waged against my father. There's barely a Democrat alive who doesn't invoke Russia when the heat comes on. It's a clue to their sweaty desperation. Representative Jamie Raskin rushed out of Hunter's deposition hearing room after only an hour to cry Smirnov, who is so irrelevant he wasn't even a witness to the impeachment inquiry since nobody knew who he was. But according to Raskin, Smirnov was the impeachment inquiry's star witness. You can find this whole piece by Miranda Devine. We're not going to go through all of it. Like I said, we're going to jump around a lot this morning, but that's at the New York Post. Now the White House, I find this interesting too. CNN gets the exclusive on this. I want to be fair. CNN gets the exclusive on this piece that the White House called on Fox News executives to retract the bogus FBI informant claims against Biden. How does CNN get the exclusive on a memo sent to Fox News? But the White House is formally calling on Fox News to walk back its coverage of bribery and corruption allegations against President Joe Biden. This is very similar to the letters, and it's actually written by the same guy, this Ian Sams, that the White House, with this, as it says very often, aggressive nature towards the press now, that they're saying they don't like the coverage. And what normally happens, Fox News is not doing this, but what normally happens, and we had a great piece about this a couple weeks ago, where there are maybe young reporters or even reporters that just don't really care. They'll say, I'm not going to report on this because the White House doesn't want me to report on it. It's unfortunate, but it's the ways of the world because the mainstream media, the legacy media, if you will, is very focused on ensuring that Trump does not win and that Biden does, if you just look at the coverage that we bring to you daily about the media's coverage of things. In a letter sent to the right-wing network's top brass this week, again, this is coming from CNN, from left-wing CNN. I don't know if they can do it. We all can do it, which has not been previously reported. Ian Sams, a top White House spokesperson, noted that the ex-FBI informant, who was a source of the bribery claims, has now been charged by federal authorities for allegedly fabricating the story. Quote, despite this, Fox has taken no steps to retract, correct, or update its reporting on this false allegation from 2023. The letter is the latest from the Biden White House, which has taken a more aggressive approach to news coverage of the president that it sees as unfair in the run-up to the November election. All right. Anyway, now Biden did testify yesterday that he was high or drunk while writing the message that said, sitting here with my father, the $5 million China shakedown text. But whatever that means, he still got the $5 million, or he still got the money. What I know, addiction is not something to take lightly, but I know he's been using this. He said to save democracy, he's going to stay sober, these type of things. So now, when many times you hear at these hearings, I do not recall, I guess the excuse would be I was high or drunk, and I typed that message to the wrong person. The readout said Hunter admitted that he was high or drunk when he sent the sitting here with my father's WhatsApp message, sent it to the wrong recipient, and is now embarrassed by the message. The same source said that Hunter confirmed that his dad was not sitting next to him, as photos from the first son's abandoned laptop actually show he was at his dad's Williamton, Delaware home on the day of the threat. A second source confirmed to the Post that Hunter Biden gave the excuse that he may have been high at the time of writing the message. Yes, this was behind closed doors, if you're not familiar. I don't want to spend the whole morning on this. You can find out more at the New York Post going through the hearing, what is being said. Republican and Democrat committee members bickered over the course of the 6.5-hour testimony about whether the evidence gathered at this point amounted to the high crimes and misdemeanors. Jamie Raskin, who we mentioned earlier, said, this is supposed to be an impeachment investigation, which means it's supposed to be focused on treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors committed by the president. We've heard no evidence of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors touching Joe Biden. Now, James Comer said, I think it's a great deposition for us, adding that the first son's testimony yielded contradictory statements that need further review, much like we saw from Joe Biden's brother. Okay. Our next break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. It's a little bit snowy out there, so be careful on your way into school or your way into work. Hey, do you remember how, taking a note, I sometimes forget that I'm on TV. It's like the radio does. Do you know how we've been talking about the lack of interest of young people in this administration, this kind of apathy? They're not happy with Joe Biden, especially the younger faction that are in that Democrat Party that don't like his stance on Israel, that call him Genocide Joe. They're afraid that because of Biden and Trump's age, that younger people just aren't all that excited to vote. And we've seen lately some of the ways that Joe Biden has tried to combat issues like this, whether it is a stance on Israel that's finding such anger from so many in the Democrat Party, or whether it's the young vote, and we talked about the forgetting of student loans. And many people calling it at the time when we talked about that story, basically a payout, a way to buy someone's vote. It was $1.2 billion, affected very few people, but it's about, getting that, maybe that energy level back up. Well, we've got a new level to this. And if you are a college student that is watching, here is a great opportunity for you to make money off the taxpayer. Vice President Kamala Harris revealed yesterday that the government could pay college students to register voters. Harris said that students could receive the funds from the work-study federal program that pays a student's wages while employed at a part-time job. Quote, we have been doing work to promote voter participation for students. I bet you have. We know that this is why we had such a great discussion yesterday about the New York Times suggesting that the voting age should be moved down to 16. We know that the Democrat Party specifically, the media specifically, see an opportunity here to shape and mold these younger people to vote the way that they want. So this comes as no surprise. But for example, Vice President Harris said, we have under the federal work study program now allow students get paid through federal work study to register people and to be nonpartisan poll workers. As we know, this is important for a number of reasons. One, to engage our young leaders in this process and activate them in terms of their ability to strengthen our communities. Senator Bill Hagerty, Republican from Tennessee, said Biden signed that order ordering federal government to use taxpayer money to mobilize his voters. They have foiled for details, and I've sought them in Congress, but Biden is hiding them. Sounds like the election year plan is underway. There you go. Make a little fold-in money for your pocket if you are a college student. Oh, hey, look, we're getting text messages. Okay, let's see. How am I doing on time? I know I keep saying that, but I don't have the rhythm down quite yet. Let's continue to talk about the presidential election for just a moment, if you don't mind. This caught me off guard. I've got to admit, this caught me off guard. And I'm not going to say I'm excited about it. I just think it's in today's time of presidential politics, it isn't a surprise. It's just interesting. Yes, Marianne Williamson has re-entered the race after she beat poor Dean Phillips in Michigan. If you recall, I mentioned this on yesterday's program, that Dean Phillips came in, fourth in a two-person race. And what I mean by two-person race is you had in Michigan, you had Biden and Dean Phillips are the only two people actually still running for the Democrat nomination. Okay? Marianne Williamson had dropped out, but her name was still on the ballot. And then you had the uncommitted that we talked about earlier this morning. So now, Dean Phillips, who is running, came in fourth in a two-person race. Marianne Williamson, who had dropped out, bested Dean Phillips, and Marianne Williamson said, hey, I think I see an opportunity here. She made the unusual move of unsuspending her long shot campaign. I've got to say, have you ever seen that happen before? Where I'm sure it's, well, I guess technically, did John McCain do that? Because he suspended his campaign during that Wall Street issue. But did he ever officially say, I'm unsuspending it, or was just known he was going to come back? Anyway, Williamson, despite having dropped her bid, edged out Dean Phillips for third in the Michigan Democrat primary with over 98% of expected votes reported. As of Wednesday morning, she had received about 3% of the vote in Michigan to Phillips' 2.7%. Biden won 81%, while uncommitted received about 13%. So it went Biden, uncommitted, Williamson, Phillips. Phillips, the only one that was officially still facing Biden, but Marianne Williamson's seeing an opportunity. As of today, she said, I am unsuspending my campaign for the presidency of the United States. Wow. Little history there. What do you think? What do you think of her chances? Hey, speaking of taking a break, we're going to talk more about the presidential race here in just a little bit. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street. I received this comment from a viewer, and I'm glad, and I want to thank you for the reminder. You can reach out to me at any time. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. They are bringing to our attention that there will be a teletown hall with our Congressman Nick Langworthy tonight at 7:30. You just call in and you're part of a town hall. You get to hear what he has to say. Sometimes I guess I understand that you can ask questions at certain points. I have not attended one, but it's at 7:30 tonight. Here is the phone number. Write this down. Ready? 833-380-0618. Again, 833-380-0618, and call at 7:30, and you can be a part of Nick Langworthy's Teletown Hall. We also have another comment from a viewer. Oh, this is a long one. I will read that after break, just to make sure that I don't stumble over words. Okay. Speaking of Marianne Williamson, who is now running a campaign, someone we've talked about quite often, or unsuspended her campaign, is now rerunning, however you want to say it. How about Gavin Newsom, who many have said is running a shadow campaign that's really been very active. You would almost think running for president, but saying the whole time, no, I'm just here to support Biden. And so Gavin Newsom's name is on the short list of all these articles you read that if Biden were to step down and decide not to run, you know the whole thing. Well, Gavin Newsom, if you're not aware, is the California governor. And it's good to know Gavin Newsom. It's good to be friends with Gavin Newsom. I would argue it's good to donate to Gavin Newsom because in California, they just raised the minimum wage to $20 an hour, okay? So we will be coming up on that pretty soon here in New York. That's just the way this works. So $20 minimum wage law. You know who was exempted from this in California? Panera Bread. Now, why is that? Some have speculated because of the long-standing relationship and donorship with fast food restaurateur Greg Flynn. That's according to Bloomberg. Last year, Newsom signed a law to raise the minimum wage for the state's fast food workers from $16 an hour to $20 an hour starting this April. But there was one mystifying exemption. Fast food chains that sell bread as a standalone item did not have to worry about the $20. Now, they're trying to justify this. Newsom supporters are trying to say, well, you know, they're still going to have to raise the minimum wage or they won't be able to compete. That's not the point. They own 24 locations in California. Flynn and Newsom attended the same high school, where they overlapped for 1 year. Flynn, and I'm not so concerned about the high school thing. Flynn has also donated at least $164,000 to Newsom's political campaigns. Now, Newsom said that this oddly specific rule, where fast food restaurants are exempt from the $20 minimum wage if they sell bread standalone, is all due to the sausage making, was his quote, of politics. Okay. Flynn said that he played no role in creating the bread exemption, and Panera Bread didn't respond to Bloomberg's request for comments. Okay, good to know. It's good to know certain people higher up. All right, I just had to mention that. I know it wasn't the most important issue of the day, but we got to take another short break, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. Okay, here's a comment from, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but fan of Frankly Speaking, Ken. Ken says, it's sad that what is happening to America. We have a political world that is supposed to work for the benefit of all Americans, but they actually work for their own interest. I may be an exemption, but my belief is that when you shake hands with any politician, you should count your fingers when you get your hand back. There are no consequences other than voting them out for lying to their bosses. And with a huge portion of the electorate uninformed, that isn't working. Our politicians know that a lie goes around the world 10 times before the truth gets up in the morning. How do we fix the system in a way that politicians don't have to vote on their own ethics? That is the trillion-dollar question. How do we fix the system? I know this is going to sound naive. I think the easiest, and it's not a fix, I'm not saying it's a fix, but it's the beginning, is this idea of term limits. Because as I know, the people that don't want term limits always say, well, the real term limits are vote them out. We all know incumbents have the benefit. They start with a leg up. So I don't have that answer. I'll pose that to anybody that's watching. How do we fix that system? And again, I'm not saying term limits are the be-all and end-all. I think that's a start. I think there's too many people that do get in there relatively poor and walk away as millionaires and darn near billionaires. So how do you fix that system? How do you ever get any politician to vote for term limits too, mind you? So that's why I say it's a little naive. But you add on there's just so much money to be had. That's why for years now, politicians have avoided and ignored the China threat. It's all going back to the money. So it is really, unfortunately in a way, voting them out is really only recourse, and it just doesn't work so often because of incumbent. It's always vote the bums out. Well, not my bum, not this guy or girl that's over here, not them, but everybody else, vote them out. It's kind of the nature of it all. So I don't have the answer, but if someone else does, please share it with us. Did you see today Biden and Trump are going to be visiting the border? Well, on the same day, obviously not together. One piece, surprisingly from CNN, and it was more aimed at Biden, saying, on the border, voters want action, not photo ops. Why is Biden visiting now, after all but ignoring the border since his inauguration? Well, he didn't, not really. I mean, day one, he signed the executive order to get rid of Trump's executive order, so he hasn't ignored it. But the answer is simple. Disastrous polls, and that's what it boils down to with Biden, of course. Voters are tired of politicians merely complaining about problems. They're exhausted by blue ribbon commissions, doomed compromise, and Capitol Hill gridlock. They're done with photo ops next to broken borders, walls, and other campaign stunts. What they want is results. Something Biden can provide with the stroke of his pen once he gets back from Texas, that is. I don't think, I know they're saying that he'll do that before the State of the Union, and he may. But what's your thought on this? Is it too little, too late? I mean, if he could have done it the whole time, why didn't he do it 3 years ago? Why now are they kind of faking this outrage? We've got to take another break. That's our last break, and then we're going to wrap up, and we're going to move quickly. So stay with us. One more thing on immigration, and then that'll be it for the program. It's sad to see how fast this goes, isn't it? We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. All right, we're going to move fast, folks. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, live from the Hesselson studio. Comments from viewers. McDonald's, Burger King's, Wendy's, etc. should put plain buns on the menu. That's a great point. In California, to the Gavin Newsom story. Yeah, you want to buy a McMuffin? You want to buy the roll that we use at Wendy's? I think that's a great idea. That would get them so they don't have to pay $20 minimum wage. Trump should go to the same place on the border that Biden is and then ask him to debate him if and when. Good point. And how about this, to Ken's question about how do we fix the problem? Maybe we should require a full IRS audit for anyone seeking public office, along with a psychological exam to determine any mental health issues that are present. Thank you. All right, ready? Let's move fast, folks. First of all, Assembly and Senate Republicans here in New York State renamed the legislation restoring law enforcement cooperation with federal immigration officials to Lakin's Law after that tragic story that we've been talking about for a week. In the wake of the tragic death of Laken Riley, members of the Senate and Assembly Republican Conference are blasting Governor Hochul and New York Democrats for protecting dangerous sanctuary policies. In response to the inaction of the New York Democrats, this bill would require local and state law enforcement in certain courts to notify ICE of the arrest or conviction of non-citizens, reinstate the 365-day maximum sentence for a Class A misdemeanor, and repeal the Protect Our Courts Act of 2020, which was designed to discourage cooperation enforcement of federal law enforcement. Assemblyman Phil Palmesano weighed in on this, saying, "Today I join my colleagues to once again call for an end to New York's sanctuary state status by requiring all law enforcement agencies to cooperate with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement by notifying ICE upon the arrest of a non-citizen." Thank you to the Assemblyman. Next, Governor Hochul has approved the new congressional maps that give Democrats a slight edge. It's always a slight edge. Interesting. They're saying since there was no real huge changes, they don't believe Republicans will bring up a lawsuit. Man, did you see that Jayapal and Omar from the squad both traveled to Cuba last week, a secret trip no one knew about? Republicans are outraged. And finally, there's an interesting piece. We're not going to have time to bring it up. It's by Ricky Schlott. I don't know how to say Schlott, right? Okay. It's a tough one. Saying, and this is at the New York Post, "No wonder boys are turning towards conservative beliefs. It's rebellion against their parents' woke ideology." I think you'll find that interesting. Have a great day, everyone. I can't believe how fast this show went. Thank you to all the comments. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the Friday edition of Frankly Speaking, starting at 7 a.m. only on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone.